welcome everybody to Gen AI Practical Applications. I'm Zander Miller, Digital Services Instruction Librarian, Kenosha Public Library. So I have a lot of experience with generative AI, at least in the library field as a whole, in terms of information, information sharing, hallucinations, all sorts of talking about how libraries can work around or with generative AI or not work with it, because there are a variety of issues and topics involving AI, but that is not this program. So this program is more about use. I have another program, What's the Deal with AI? That one for Kenosha Community Media. It's on their YouTube channel, an older version of it, but it does change each time I run it. So because there's new developments in generative AI in the world every 6 months, even though the technology at its core has not really changed that much since. So, but today we're going to talk about practical applications of generative AI. I do want to be quite specific about where this is practical. This is going to be practical with chatbots. So you're talking things like ChatGPT or Gemini or Copilot's AI. We're talking about the chatbot specifically with them. There are different generative AI tools, like things like with AI agents, for example, but we're not talking about those today. Okay. So, some things we are definitely going to go over. We're going to talk about what prompt engineering is. Prompt engineering, or prompts, are what you actually input into an AI chatbot. So when you're having a conversation with one or typing, giving it something, that is a prompt. And the idea of prompt engineering is that there's an art and science to optimizing prompts to guide AI models, particularly large language models, towards generating a desired response or working with you to gain a response of some kind. We'll also look at practical examples in library work. So I will actually use a generative AI chatbot to develop a request for proposal. So I'm going to use that as a practical example that might be useful in library spaces. And then we're going to discuss and do some testing. So I will ask, and I've already asked, we're going to actually look at garden planning using an AI chatbot, which I will forewarn you now, I know nothing about garden planning. We're going to see if a generative AI chatbot is useful for that purpose, or how we could use it for that purpose. Okay, so generally, prompt engineering concepts work across all work fields. So you could be a data scientist, librarian, gardener, cook. The concepts of prompt engineering will work cross-field because it mostly relies on the structure of how you prompt the AI and the knowledge that you, as the user, provide that AI. Before I continue, I forgot to give my little forewarning note. I'm going to use the term AI and Gen AI for the purpose of this class. I'm not going to make a distinction between Gen AI and AI. AI and generative AI are two separate things and fields, but I'm going to use just AI for short. So we all understand that? Okay, we're getting head nods. Great. So prompt engineering works regardless of its field. But it works best or better with expertise in the field that you're talking about. I'm going to show a bit of an example of that later. It is very good to have knowledge in a field to know how to engineer a prompt correctly. I also put this directly in here. All generative AI hallucinates. Does it hallucinate all the time? No, but it can. And so this is one of those areas where having in-field expertise is important, because you don't want to just rely on generative AI to make something and then never check it against your own knowledge, abilities, or ability to find information. Generative AI can just make things up or make it something that breaks, and it can be very confident about it. So it's a note in here to consider that all AI, generative AI, can hallucinate at this stage in its development. And you, the user, will have to correct it or make corrections to those mistakes. That is quite important. It's like if you were ever working with another individual and you send drafts of work to each other, you're going to be thinking like that. That draft is not perfect that first time around. You're going to have to make corrections. You may have to work together on different things, and you may have to adjust terminology, formatting, or it just gives you something completely out of left field, and you have to restart from the beginning. Okay, I've been using the term prompt engineering. Let's talk a bit more about what that is. So there are 4 main areas to consider for prompt engineering. They are persona, task, context, and format. And these specific areas are coming from Google's Gemini Prompting Guide 101. That's a publicly available document. You can Google search that exact document and find it and read that for yourself as well. So the example on the screen here is an example that is in that document. So there are 4 colors in this. So we got blue, red, yellow, and green. The blue is the persona. You are a program manager in industry. So that is telling the AI its role, like what its role, where it is in the context of what this prompt is going to be. So if I was to, with my future example, I am a library administrator that is in public libraries. That would be an example of that persona. The red is the task that we want it to complete. In this case, draft an executive summary email to, or in my example that we'll use later, draft an RFP template or request for proposal template, and that would be the task itself. So next is in yellow. The yellow is the context. In here, email to person based on details about relevant program docs. So in this case, we are making it know that there are relevant documents that it needs to reference and that it's going to a specific person. My request for a proposal might look different if I'm sharing it to fellow librarians or if I'm sharing it with a library director. There may be different levels of context, ability, or finalization that the generative AI may have. And in green, the green stands for, or it gives you an idea of these should be bullet points, and gives you the format. That format is green. So that's going to give you the general look of what it'll output. So if I wanted an example draft, I would say, make it a template with placeholder text for the request for proposal. So 4 areas to consider when making that. So let's take a look. I have a video. This was quite interesting. When I was actually sent this video from my friend who works at Google, and we were talking about coding and coding at Google itself. So I'm going to have us watch this for a short while. We're not going to watch the whole thing because the whole thing I think is like 40 minutes long. We're going to watch part of it because this part is relevant for the idea of prompt engineering itself. So let's give it a second.
Ready and open to have a look at the code. All right,
So I want to note that he has already sent out given a prompt to, and it's a very long prompt. He actually used AI to help him go from voice to text for the prompt itself. We're not going to worry about that. We're looking at the output itself and his thoughts about it.
We've got a proposal here, so let's have a look.
So we've got this proposed architecture. Let's just have a glance down here. So this is important. This is an important part of this. Don't just blindly accept it. There will be times where it goes off on a tangent, makes stuff up, and comes up with silly ideas. So it's important to review what it proposes here, and always ask it to propose plans that you can review before you get it to execute on stuff. So I'm just having a look over this. This looks good. Yeah. These kinds of things, obviously, the more, like it always comes back to, the more understanding you have of these kind of basics, command line interface processes, the better you're going to understand what it's proposing. But at the end of the day, we aren't working with AI. So if you don't understand something, you can just ask it to explain it. So you can kind of help each other. And that's the important thing, is it needs guidance, but it also can help you get the knowledge you need to give it the guidance that it needs. And that's a kind of important part of working with AI, I think.
Okay, so this is
Okay. So that's the bit that we're watching there. And so I found this note fascinating. So he is a professional with programming, coding in general. And he has a few videos on how he vibe codes, which the idea of vibe coding is you are prompting AI to make code for you instead of writing all of the context and scenarios yourself. And I found it very fascinating because he argues that he's using AI is easier for him. And the whole video is about how this process is faster and creates a better workflow for his ability to code. And I find it great in the context of learning how to use AI effectively that even this guy who can develop his own apps, and he has developed his own apps on his own, and can do it without AI, is using AI to make things faster. But he literally points out in the segment that we just watched that you have to review the output that it was giving. And that you shouldn't just execute with just what the AI produced. And that knowing more context is important. This is the part I really want to stress when it comes to prompting. My friend that works at Google, and why we were having this conversation, he had this to say about how AI is being implemented into the coding process at Google itself. Context is exactly what you learn with software engineering. Knowing the right solution requires understanding the problem. It's why context tokens are so important in AI, because finding out what the code should look like or what is good code takes a lot of information. Instead, AI tools without that context are just slamming more and more puzzle pieces together until it finds the square hole. So, to put this in other words, and there were more upset words used while in our conversation that I've muted out for the purpose of a public program. It's that it needs context to actually understand or work through things. And if the person using it, the coder at Google, doesn't understand the context of how the code is supposed to interact with itself and with other things, it's not going to give you a good output. And if you don't understand the output that it is giving, you can't correct that output yourself. So, on using code in a company like Google, between senior and junior coders, he had this to say, because this is part of where the problem is at. I think the idea of someone who knows how to program well using it for a side project is fine. They know generally what they want. They just don't know the specifics of whatever paradigm they want. Every single line of code someone writes is supposed to be code reviewed. If someone who is junior doesn't understand the implications of their code, I have to review it more thoroughly because you're telling me someone with no direct context wrote that code. So what he's saying here, if every single line of code is reviewed, especially at professional companies, every single line, especially if it's written by a junior, when that code is submitted to be reviewed, the person reviewing it, if they know their junior used AI to generate that code, they actually have to do more work to verify that that code works, which he does not want to do. That is extra work. So there's a difference here. So professionals with a lot of experience, a lot of context, without using AI, they're actually the ones that can probably use the tool better. For me, I know I said that like it applies to all fields. If I were to try to use generative AI, and I have tried to have it make a script for Google Sheets with me, no coding experience, it half worked. I think the funniest part of trying to do that is I wanted to make a spreadsheet that color-coded specific types of responses. And somehow I made it do a Christmas lights display, a blinking Christmas lights display, essentially. I got no idea how that happened, what the code looked like that made it happen. And eventually I brought it to someone who does know how to code, and it still took us 2 hours to actually fix that. So keep that in mind. For anyone watching later, don't ship a product that is just straight out the oven of a generative AI, because problems may happen later on that if you don't know enough about what you're doing already, could have an issue. Okay, let's talk about hallucinations, because we cannot talk about context and correctness and all of that information without talking about hallucinations. And I'll skip ahead a little bit, is that clear and specific prompts are extremely important for making something have less of a chance to hallucinate. So as the more you limit what you want the AI to do, the less chance that it's going to hallucinate something outside of those limits. There's still a chance. I'm not saying there's 0% chance that it'll hallucinate if you give it a 3-page essay about what you want it to do. But it does help. So let's see what he's got to say about hallucinations here.
Now, while large language models can generate fluent and coherent text on various topics and domains, they are also prone to just make stuff up. Plausible sounding nonsense. So let's discuss, first of all, what a hallucination is. We'll discuss why they happen, and we'll take some steps to describe how you can minimize hallucinations with LLMs. Now, hallucinations are outputs of LLMs that deviate from facts or contextual logic, and they can range from minor inconsistencies to completely fabricated or contradictory statements. And we can categorize hallucinations across different levels of granularity. Now, at the lowest level of granularity, we could consider sentence contradiction. This is really the simplest type, and this is where an LLM generates a sentence that contradicts one of the previous sentences. So, the sky is blue today. The sky is green today. Another example would be prompt contradiction. And this is where the generated sentence contradicts with the prompt that was used to generate it. So if I ask an LLM to write a positive review of a restaurant, and it returns, the food was terrible and the service was rude, that would be in direct contradiction to what I asked. Now, we already gave some examples of another type here, which is factual contradictions. And these factual contradictions or factual error hallucinations are really just that, absolutely nailed on facts that it got wrong. Barack Obama was the first president of the United States, something like that. And then there are also nonsensical or otherwise known as sort of irrelevant kind of information-based hallucinations, where it just puts in something that really has no place being there. Like, the capital of France is Paris. Paris is also the name of a famous singer. Okay, thanks. Now, with the question of what LLM hallucinations are answered, we really need to answer the question of why. And it's not an easy one to answer, because the way that they derive their output is something of a black box, even to the engineers of the LLM itself. But there are a number of common causes. So let's take a look at a few of those.
So I'm going to stop us here. We're not going to go fully into the why. But something that, at least in a lot of my presentations or conversations with librarians and library staff, is that we don't fully understand the why of how LLMs in generative AI works, LLMs being large language models. We understand that there's an input. We understand that something happens that's related to machine learning and context building, all these really specific AI topic things. And we understand that there's an output. We don't understand how it goes from input to output. That we can't break down and dissect exactly how it got there, but we know it got somewhere. And so what we're doing is we're looking at what it was input, what was output, and making our own conjectures of how this works. So let's actually see some of how this can function. So I will note, I am using Google's Gemini. Our library has access to Gemini as that we are a Google organization. We have an enterprise set up, and Google really, really, really likes just foisting their new stuff upon their enterprise setups. So we have access to Gemini, all the staff do. And so I'm going to show how I would potentially prompt this to give me a draft of a request for proposal. So let's think here. So I'm going to start with giving it a persona. So you are a library manager. So it is a library manager. That's who the AI is going to try to represent in the prompt. Who needs to create a request for proposal. So here is what I'm asking it to do. Create a request for proposal. Really basic, that's what I want it to do. And so now I want to give it context. What's going on, how much money is in there. There is a budget of, actually, give me a number. What budget do we want to work with? $50,000. Okay. I didn't say for what, but we'll see. We have a budget of $50,000 for, let's say, $50,000 for a book bike, an electric book bike. So I have seen, it's very similar to bookmobiles, but on a bike. Works really well in like flat, temperate climates, and can work pretty nicely. They usually come with a wagon, so I know a bit of context of how these things work. Electric book bike. The book bike must work, must be chargeable. Yep, because we don't want to work on batteries. So whatever we get has to charge. It must come with a wagon that can hold, let's say 500 pounds of books, and the bike itself must be able to hold a, let's say 6'5", 6'6", all right, we'll go with that, person, and include turn signals. Okay, so that's a bit of context. Now, I'm going to tell you now, this is not a lot of context. Oh yeah, actually I should add, and the wheels should work on ice and dirt. Not a lot of context. Use placeholder text where I need to provide additional information about the library's story and why we are putting out this request for proposal. Give me a draft outline for this request for proposal. So that is the format that we talked about earlier. That is the general format. So how good of a job do we think it's going to do? I see doubts. Okay. So something that's been interesting that Gemini has introduced, or well, I should say Google, is that there are modes that we can give their chatbot. There's fast, thinking, and pro. Now, we're not going to touch pro because they're saying advanced math and code with 3.1 pro. I'm going to avoid it because we're not coding, we're not doing math. However, I do want to actually see the difference between fast and thinking. So I will say this up front. I have not used the differences there. I have no idea what's going to come out. Technically, I have no idea what's going to come out of this because I don't understand why it does what it does. But I'm going to do two separate chats with the same information, and let's see what happens. So we're going to have it fast first. Okay. So it is thinking, it is going. Now, I never mentioned outreach in my original request. However, it must know somewhere for some information that typically is library outreach departments that are getting a mobile electric book bike. And so it gives it an RFP number, budget, $50,000, inclusive of shipping customization. I didn't even think about shipping as a potential cost. Date issued February 24th, that's today's date. So here is, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take all of this and copy it. And I just want to make a doc. So give me a second to make that doc where we're going to look at it. Because I don't know about you, but I do not like the format that it gave me. So I'm going to pull this new tab, walk over, and after this, we'll do some gardening. All right. So here we go. So funnily enough, something I noticed just because I work in Google Docs a lot, it uses headings for accessibility purposes. So it's using headings and titles here. And so all of this is navigatable on the side in the document tabs. So as we look, we have seeking proposals for a high-capacity, heavy-duty electric book bike system. So this is where our placeholder is, providing brief history of a library, so it's pulling whatever it has from its library of stuff to grab information about how RFPs are done and giving me something to write about. And it gives an example of what to put there. It's giving me what's the purpose of the RFP. And now, we didn't mention where we were, but because I mentioned snow and dirt, To meet the demands of our climate and diverse service population, the book bike system must meet or exceed the following requirements. So, interesting. Feature high-capacity lithium-ion battery system capable of being charged via standard 120-volt outlets. I have no idea what type of outlets you use for electric bike charging, but this is something I would want to check. 120-volt outlets, because I have no idea what that looks like. So let's take a look and see. So we're talking a standard home outlet. So now this is part of exploring what answers it's giving me, because now charging, how long would it take to charge an electric bike on 120-volt home outlets? What I'm going to do so we don't get an AI response is I'm going to put -AI in my search itself. And actually, I'm going to switch even to the Alt tab because that should remove any AI search. So yes, if you add -AI to a Google search, it will remove the AI overview from that. And I'm already using Gemini. I don't need an AI overview at this point. So this is giving 3 to 5 hours as a general response. There's a QR thing. This is a response giving 4 to 8 hours. So it's going to take a while on a 120-volt port. And we might need more than that in actuality. So this is where I want to adjust what's in here, if that's in there. Rider accommodations, it's going to give safety features, LED headlamps, brake lights, and active turn signals. I didn't think of brake lights. So this is actually giving me even more to think about, assuming I don't know anything about bikes and wagons and all that stuff. So it's actually doing pretty okay, I would say. Now, there could be a lot that I'm missing because, I don't know, outreach vehicles, electric bikes, but it's giving me a place to start thinking about it, maybe I should think about this. Now, could you get this out of a meeting? Yes, you could get this out of a meeting. You can talk with, I know one of the libraries in Illinois has a book bike system that they use. I could talk with them and see. I've been to a presentation on it. It was great. But we did this within and this is not final, by the way. We have to make adjustments. We already know the 120 volts ain't gonna cut it. But it could be neat. This could help get started. And really, this is where generative AI has a really good place, is getting someone started with the work that they're gonna do and making them make adjustments to what it's giving. That's one of the actually really key ways, is it's good for starting to get the thinking process going when you don't know how to start. I will say one of my normal uses is similar to this, but I will have it create a table for me in Google Sheets. I'll give it the context of what I'm doing, what parameters I want that table to have, and how I want it to look. Gives me a brief table, and then I give the info that the table needs to make its thing. I can knock that out in 5 minutes versus taking 30 minutes without using the AI tool. But I generally know what I'm looking for when I'm doing that. And that's a big difference between the marketing of AI tools versus actual use case scenarios. And I will say, I've never done an RFP before, but it's giving some of the stuff that I would expect and the language that I would expect there. And this is something that is a very key no of, if you see this in any document or book or anything, someone didn't review their draft of what the AI gave them, because this is Gemini. I copied and pasted the whole thing from Gemini. That is not part of my document. That is the last part of Gemini giving that request. So if you ever see that, that means someone used Gemini or another AI chatbot to make something and then never checked and edited it. I would never, and I mean this, I usually don't say never. I'm usually like, so I would never give this to someone else. This is a starting place for my work, and this would be how I would get started with my work. Of course, after I review a few drafts and all that. Something that is neat, at least with Gemini, and it's going to vary by tool that you have, is that if I had example requests for proposals, I could actually upload those proposals in here and have them take over the output. Now I'm going to ask it a funny thing. Now do the same thing, but in Shakespearean language. Now I'm going to spell it wrong on purpose and see what happens. Okay, I'm going to scroll all the way to the bottom. Ooh, export to Sheets. Interesting. That's, okay, never mind. We're going to go here. I'm going to get rid of this. I'm not actually doing this, so I am okay with getting rid of it. Let's paste this. A royal proclamation and request for proposal, the steed of script. That's good. 50,000 gold pieces. That's actually probably worth a lot more than $50,000. So yeah, you could have it do silly stuff like this too. So what we wanted to do is open a completely new window with this and see what it looks like with a new chat. So I'm going to open a new chat. I'm going to paste this in, and instead of fast, we're going to put it in thinking. And I am actually curious what's going to happen here, because I did not prep this far. All right, thinking. I'm going to hit that. I'm going to go here, get rid of this. We don't need it anymore. And, ooh, show thinking. Oh, interesting. So the way this works is actually trying to tell you what its thought process, in quotes, it's not actually thinking, would be for doing this. Now, I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to get rid of that first part. I want to see if this does any better. Note that I've mentioned before that the technology hasn't really changed that much. It's more what options you see in the AI tools themselves. So this is interesting. The differences here could be interesting. All-terrain electric outreach vehicle, the book bike. Note, if you input a prompt, you could get different answers every single time. Again, we don't know how it thinks, but we know input, some kind of output, something happens in between. But we don't know how we got there. So this is looking like, it's a bit more detailed in what it's looking like, and it uses more flowery language, I'd want to say. Just kind of giving it a general idea, but it is highlighting the areas that were very specific in my prompt. It's putting those in bold. And it's just kind of expanding on what the first one did while giving more details, information that it thinks I might actually want. So it's interesting, and it gives me areas to put things in, but it seems more flowery. It doesn't seem actually that different. So I wanted to demonstrate that just because for one, I've never done that before, and I wanted to see what does that mean. And really, it didn't mean that much in the context of what we're doing. And maybe there's a better way to use that. We'll see. But now, I'm going to do new chat. I want to talk about flowering, or gardening. So I'm going to have us all kind of work together to draft a prompt for this. So let's start with the basics. Who are we? What is the persona we want to give the generative AI when it comes to garden planning?
Community garden landscaper?
You are a community garden landscaper. Okay. So we got context. What do we want it to do? And we can, by the way, we can be as expansive or not as minimal as we want. This is where we see the outputs that we're giving it. So, what do you want it to do?
Plant a tree.
Okay. Create a plan for planting a tree. What What else? What else? Is there anything else we wanted to do? Or should we give context of what we want it to know as it creates this plan?
One that will be limited in branching and growth.
For planting a tree that will be limited. Could you repeat that for me?
Height and branching.
In height and branching. Give me a why there. Why would it be limited in height and branching?
To maximize crop space.
Crop space. Okay, so creating a plan for planting a tree that will be limited in height and branching to maximize crop space. I'm going to ask another question of you. In the context of the crops, where is the tree?
I think that's part of what we want to know.
Ooh, okay. We want to know where this tree should be planted relative to the crops. Now, any more context we want to give it?
We should have continuous bloom underneath the tree.
Okay. Anything else? Okay, we'll stop there. What format do we want this in? Or like, what do we want this output to look like?
A map?
Possible. Generate a map. Actually, I'm going to put generate multiple potential maps of what this plan looks like. I'm going to also include as well as a text description of the plan, the multiple maps, and why they work. Okay, so you're a community garden landscaper. Create a plan for planting a tree that will be limited in height and branching to maximize crop space. We want to know where this tree should be planted relative to the crops. We should have continuous bloom underneath the tree. If possible, generate multiple potential maps of what this plan looks like, as well as a text description of the multiple maps and why they work. All right, fast or thinking? Okay, let's do that and go. Of course, it's going to, I'm going to make a new doc for us so we don't have to look on a black screen. It is going, it is working. Okay, I'm going to scroll all the way down. Ooh, it's still going. It's still going. I'm just going to have to wait a little bit. What do we think we're going to get here? Ooh, I'm going to get rid of this. Oh, refining strategy adaptation. I wonder if it's done. Okay, here we go. Copy. Paste. How many pages is this? Okay, it's 6 pages. All right. So ignore that top part. Strategy, espalier and dwarf rootstock. Either of you know what that is? I'm seeing one nod. Okay. I'm guessing you're the gardener, right? Okay. I may be looking to you. I may be looking to you for some context because I know nothing about this. So I'm gonna even zoom in a little bit. To keep tree height limited in height and branching, you have 2 main options: dwarf or miniature varieties, and espalier training. Okay, what is this? Okay, I have to know what this is. That is a word I have never seen before. How to espalier fruit trees. Take a minimum of 3 years to so you can train trees. What? I'm learning something new today. Okay. So this technique where the tree is pruned and tied to a flat frame like a fence. It grows in 2D rather than 3D, taking up almost zero horizontal footprint while providing high yields. Okay, so that would be a way to keep it contained. Plan 1, the sundial, central focal point. In this layout, the tree is the centerpiece. Works best if you have a square, circular plot. Want to create distinct zones. So tree placement, dead center. And it includes a logic, as well as continuous bloom understory. Interesting. I'd have to print this out, I think, for us to really get a note of what this is doing and what it means. I can generate visual representations of layouts for you to show your community board. I'll create 2 images. Image generation typically takes longer than text. I do want to see if it actually did do that. So these were just the visualizing your garden, comparison of the maps. Oh, okay. I'm gonna have to find this. I think 3D overhead, starting the generation now. Planting maps. So it didn't just put it in here. So that's something we would have to have, but we do have something to export into Google Sheets. So let's see what this looks like. Open Sheets. That's it. Interesting. But it gives a direct comparison of different areas, but it doesn't give us a map. It's still saying I'm generating 2 visual maps, so I want to see if it actually did that. This is another comparison similar to the other one. It is also giving more about why it works. And about specific zones. So it never made those images for us. Oh well. This is a live demonstration of it thinks it's going to make an image, but doesn't. But it does make a starting point. Now, is this good or not? I'm not a gardener. I would not be able to tell you. Unless we analyze this for details, we don't know if the AI hallucinated yet. But this is where the user's expertise really matters, because I can look at this and be like, yeah, that looks fine. But there might be something in here that makes absolutely no sense. Like dwarf root stock could be a thing. I don't know what that is, or if that's even viable, or what plants that would work with. I have no idea. I would have to do additional research outside of the generative AI to know what all of these things mean and what they are and how to make adjustments to them. And that is where your personal expertise is really going to adjust how you use any sort of generative AI. Because I know I'm using Google's Gemini. I don't know if I know other things are going to work similarly. So even if ChatGPT, the same concepts that we're talking about work. The context and your own expertise are irreplaceable, basically, is what I'm trying to say. Okay, we have 11 minutes left. That is what I have for our program today. Any questions or other things you'd like to experiment with in terms of Gemini and generative AI in the time that we have?
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
What's the difference between AI and generative AI?
So, AI and generative AI. AI itself is an umbrella field of computer science. So AI, there's a lot of technologies that already have AI in them. For example, cars with blind spot detection, those are a form of AI that is mirroring a human's ability to actually do and detect cars in it, because it is a computer actively seeing if something crosses into a specific zone and notifying you that something's there, and it's usually in a spot that's blind. And even things like phones and autofocusing, that is technically a type of machine learning or AI that lets that work. Generative AI is the thing that's kind of blew up in 2022 with ChatGPT and OpenAI. That is a type of system that works using a large language model. And usually it takes an input and gives you an output. So the part that we don't know is between the input and output, but it is trying to mimic human language, human thought, by going through a similar process to how we actually think in our neural networks. That was a long-winded explanation. I have a program that's specifically like an hour of that, but that's the short difference between the two. AI itself is an entire field, and generative AI is in it, but is not solely. Generative AI is not everything that AI is. So when next time you're like, even things like sliding doors, like with auto detection for someone arriving, is a form of machine learning. It has to know how to detect that something is there. It could also be a very extremely low form where it's just like something is there and the door opens and it's a leaf instead of a person. Or it could be even things like photo verification for like ID.me. If you're doing government things, they'll have you like put your face in a certain part of the frame. And that is a form of machine learning with AI, because you can tell there are some errors in how it works, because some people's faces just never get detected, even though it's a clear image. It works very well, but that is an example of poor training for that system that is supposed to like detect that. But that is not generative AI. That's just the machine learning based completely on the training. So AI, I would think more broadly, as a field of ways to make computers and systems act or mirror human verification or human thinking and knowledge, where generative AI is you are inputting something specific and it has to interpret that input and then output something based on, I should say loosely based on that input, because hallucinations happen, but based on that. That's about as short as I can make that explanation. Other questions? Anything else you want to experiment with in the time we have? Gemini is waiting. If we're anything like Google wants us to be, Google wants us to use it all the time. So I apologize for everyone online that loves Google. I also like Google a lot. All right. If there are no questions, we'll call it for the rest of the day, okay? Thank you for coming. Thank you for watching. Thank you. Use Gen AI safely and responsibly.